how much ever I thank them is not enough. I would also want to thank PIB and the Director General, Sri Dhatwalia ji, for arranging this presentation, and wish everyone in the country good health and prosperity in the new year. This year's economic survey is dedicated to all the COVID warriors who have really helped in upholding India. If you see the cover of the economic survey, we have the COVID warriors joining hands to uphold India. Doctors, nurses, scientists who have helped in developing the vaccine in record time, sanitation workers, one and all, who have come together in this time of adversity to really uphold India. The cover also captures the V-shaped recovery that has happened in the economy. In fact, mirrors the V-shaped performance that the Indian cricket team delivered in Australia as well. After being shot out for 36 within an hour, they went on to win the series. So the resilience of the Indian economy is actually mirroring the resilience of the Indian cricket team as well. This year's survey is therefore dedicated to all the COVID warriors. It's about saving lives and livelihoods, about the V-shaped economic recovery, and the fact that in this year of adversity, when a once-in-a-century pandemic has hit us, India has really outweighed on the opportunities that this pandemic provides compared to the risks. That is also being shown in the cover. Keeping up with the times, and as they say, necessity is the mother of invention, this year's economic survey is being delivered in an e-book format, and the economic survey app has been launched, which I will just show now. To understand India's policy response and the situation that India faced in March, let's imagine traveling in a Mumbai local. Typically, about 500 people travel in a Mumbai local train in one coach. Now, if suppose the trains had been running during the COVID times, this is just a thought experiment, just one person being infected in the coach could have infected 500 other people in the space of just 1 hour. In contrast, if these 500 people were working from home, as they indeed are, to infect those 500 people, it would take many days. 1 hour versus many days, 500 people that would infect actually would go and infect many more. This example displays the impact of network effects in the spread of a pandemic, the fact that the size of the population matters, the population density matters, and that is essentially the situation that India faced. And the first chapter in the economic survey in volume 1 is about India's policy response, saving lives and livelihoods amidst a once-in-a-century crisis. India's response was guided by research in epidemiology and economics. Nobel Prize-winning research by Lars Hansen and Tom Sargent, which I had the privilege of learning from both of them. Their research advocates that when faced with enormous uncertainty, policies must aim to minimize large losses. Now, faced with a pandemic, that large loss was loss of human lives. As it is said in the Mahabharata, Apadi pranaraksha hi dharmasya pratham ankuraha. Saving a life that is in jeopardy is the origin of dharma. And that is the principle that guided India's policy response. India recognized that GDP growth will come back, and it certainly has, but human lives will not. India's policy response also derived from the extensive research on epidemiology, especially that looked at the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 to come up with its policy response. One of the key things that was pointed out was the need for the pandemic curve to be flattened, because that gives time for the health and the testing infrastructure to be ramped up. In particular, one of the key learnings from this research was that the pandemic spreads faster in higher and denser populations, and that the intensity of the lockdown matters most at the beginning of the pandemic. A 1 unit increase in the population density has far greater impact on the spread of the pandemic at the onset of that pandemic compared to later. And this is one of the key reasons, one of the key points of research that guided India's policy response. Therefore, the early intense lockdown, India recognized, not only saves more human lives, but also enables a quicker, better economic recovery. The survey team has done a lot of work to show what could have been versus what actually happened. What could have been depends on, as I said, population density. It depends on the number of elderly people we have in the population. Even though India is a young population, just in absolute numbers, the number of elderly people we have is very large, and in fact larger than most countries. It depends on the number of tests that are conducted. It depends on the entire demography as well. And so, the survey team has analyzed what could have been versus what was, and that is being displayed in this particular chart, where the expected cases versus the actual cases is displayed, similarly for deaths as well. Green corresponds to actually the actual cases being lower than the expected cases, while red is the opposite. And both on cases and on deaths, India has done really well. India avoided about 37 lakh cases, according to the survey's estimation, and about 1 lakh deaths through the strategy that it adopted. The same analysis has also been done across states in India. And here as well, the expected cases and expected deaths has been taken into account. While looking at deaths, the health infrastructure also has been taken into account to estimate what could have been. One of the key things that stands out here in terms of under and over performance across states, Maharashtra is the underperformer, both in cases and in deaths. In cases, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, and Bihar are the overperformers, while on deaths, Kerala, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh are the overperformers. Now, importantly, what we do is to go and relate this to the stringency of the lockdown that was imposed. We do this not only across all countries, but also across states in India. When we analyze across countries, we find that the intensity of the initial lockdown correlates strongly with the difference in the estimated versus the actual cases across countries. But when we do that across states as well, we see the same pattern, where the stringency of the lockdown across states correlates with the cases and the deaths. And for this, the survey team actually has done outstanding amount of work, the team here, in developing an index, stringency lockdown index for the Indian states. This can be used for future research as well, because this mirrors the Oxford University's index that has been developed across countries. Using this index, that basically we show here that the performance in terms of cases and deaths correlates very strongly with the stringency of the lockdown. Now, we certainly recognize that correlation does not translate into causality. And that's why the state-level analysis that we are doing is very important. Before I come to that, let me also talk about the economic performance. So if we relate the stringency of the lockdown to the contemporaneous effect, in other words, if the lockdown was more stringent in a particular month, what was the impact on the economic indicators in that month? And what was the impact of the stringency of the lockdown in that month on future economic indicators 3 months later? And what you see is on the left, you see actually a negative correlation, which is the decline contemporaneously. And on the right, you see the positive lagged effect, which is the V-shaped relationship, which is the V-shaped recovery that we witnessed in the economy. Now, as I was referring to earlier, correlation does not necessarily mean causality, and that is why the state-level analysis is extremely important. To show the causal impact, we need to show that other factors are not accounting for this correlation, whether it's at the country level or at the state level. Now, one of the key worries actually from a cross-country analysis is that it could be Indians have higher immunity than others. And therefore, India actually ended up having much less cases and much less deaths. It could possibly be that the BCG vaccine, that all of us have, provides immunity against the pandemic, and which maybe other countries have not had. It's possible that the environment that we live in here, that is what reduces deaths intrinsically, or it could be that anything else but the intensity of the lockdown that India did actually accounts for this correlation. The strong correlation of cases and deaths that I showed across states is important in this. I also showed the V-shaped recovery. Why? Because anything that is peculiar to India, whether it's BCG vaccine, higher immunity, the environment that we live in, is common across all states in India. Take a Maharashtra, take a Gujarat, take Karnataka. These are all common across all states in India. So the correlation that we've shown cannot come from anything that is specific or peculiar to India. And that is why the state-level analysis controls for several of these other factors that may account for India's performance, and therefore actually leads the survey to infer that the lockdown had a causal impact on saving lives and on the economic recovery. In this context, it is also important to keep in mind the intrinsic effect of the pandemic itself. Even without the intense lockdown, for their own safety, individuals would not have gone out anyway. And, most of us are still observing many of those precautions. Contact-based service sectors would be severely impacted. Many of us, for instance, before the pandemic, would have gone for a massage, which maybe we have not done that because it's a contact-based service. So many of us have taken these precautions intrinsically. Also, the precautionary motive to save, which is something that macroeconomics highlights, that whenever uncertainty is high in the economy, all households and individuals tend to save more, thinking that maybe we will need that saving for a rainy day. Therefore, the precautionary motive to save goes up, during times of uncertainty, and that certainly reduces discretionary spending. Because households may think that if we were going to buy a car, or let's say we're going to buy a house, say, let's wait out this period, maybe 6-7 months, see how the uncertainty pans out, and then we can do whatever discretionary buying. So intrinsically, again, the pandemic would have impacted discretionary spending. Further, the risk aversion and the uncertainty of demand would have also affected corporate investment, because similarly, corporates would also want to wait out and see how the pandemic spreads, how the economy performs, before they actually go and make irreversible investment. So even without the lockdown, these effects would have manifested, as they have indeed in other countries which did not have as intense a lockdown early on as we had. So even without this lockdown, the pandemic would have created significant economic impact. What the lockdown did, though, was to coordinate this response across the entire country, brought awareness of the dangers of this pandemic, and that coordination is something that macroeconomics emphasizes enormously on. On the economic side, India realized that this pandemic has both demand side and supply side impact. The demand side impact, though, is very nuanced. And India's policy response took into account that nuanced effect of the pandemic on demand. On the left side, you see this chart which shows the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana balances, how they increased during the period of the lockdown. You see that the average balance increased by about 400 rupees during the months of the lockdown. Now remember, there are 40 crore accounts, PMJDY accounts, and these are accounts at the bottom of the pyramid. Typically, economists think about the marginal propensity to consume is very high for these households. This is basically jargon to say that if the household at the bottom of the pyramid gets 1 rupee, they're likely to spend 97, 98 paise. So they do not typically save as much. But even in this demographic, during the lockdown, the savings went up on average by about 500 rupees, which is illustrative of the precautionary motive to save, and thereby the impact that it would have had on the discretionary spending. And that is also being seen in the deposits that have increased, the savings that have come into the banks. So realizing that at the onset of the pandemic, when the uncertainty is very high, also the lockdown actually imposed economic restrictions, India approached this in a calibrated manner. In the first part, when the uncertainty was very high, India's policies focused purely on ensuring necessities. 80 crore people were given free food, possibly the largest free food program across the world. Emergency credit measures were given, liquidity measures were announced, and forbearance was also announced. These were all necessities from an economic point of view. And they were optimal at that time, given the uncertainty and the resultant precautionary motives to save, as well as the economic restrictions that I talked about. What India recognized very well is that pushing down on the accelerator of a car while the brakes are already clamped only wastes fuel. Only when the clamp on the brake is removed, at that time pressing on the accelerator actually speeds the car forward. And that is something that India recognized very well. Therefore, as part of its calibrated response, in the unlock phase, India has actually gone ahead and announced demand-side measures to enable discretionary consumption to come in. The Atmanirbhar Bharat 2 and 3 measures have focused on capital expenditures. A wage subsidy program was announced as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat 3, and the focus on the national infrastructure pipeline has been enhanced. So all these will go towards increasing discretionary spending in the economy. So India's demand-side response was again unique and in a more calibrated manner. On the supply side as well, and India recognized that the pandemic will have supply-side impact too, because of possible disruptions in labor markets and the financial distress that firms could have to face, which could lead to impact on the productive capacity of the economy. And therefore, a slew of structural reforms were announced to enhance supply in the medium to long run, to avoid loss of productive capacity. These reforms primarily focus on strengthening the potential of the primary and secondary sectors, and they are intended to create jobs and thereby enable aggregate demand in the economy. And as part of these, the survey details this, describes this in detail, streamlining of labor laws, the broad-based reforms in agriculture, MSMEs, the BPO in the service sector, power, mineral sector, space, defense. All these were part of the reforms that were announced as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission. And importantly, the strategic PSU's policy. It's a very important statement of intent. If you recall, in the last year's economic survey, the impact, the wealth creation that comes from privatization was talked about. The strategic PSU policy has actually implemented that by giving the commanding heights of the economy to the private sector. This is given the history of India in its first industrial policy, having given those commanding heights of the economy to the public sector. So this is a very important statement of intent. So to summarize, the policy response that India came up with was a mature, far-sighted one. India focused on saving lives and livelihoods, took short-term pain for long-term gain, recognized that while GDP growth will recover, and it has, lost human lives cannot be brought back. This was the humane principle that guided India's policy response. India was the only country to announce a slew of structural reforms. India's demand-side measures were also different from the other countries, were more calibrated, recognizing the simple idea that pushing the accelerator, works only when the brakes are removed. The V-shaped economic recovery, without a second wave, makes India, therefore, a sui generis case in mature policy making. The mega vaccination drive that is now on should enable this recovery, especially in the services sector. In a time like this, fiscal policy becomes very important. The second chapter, therefore, focuses on fiscal policy. The title is, Does Growth Lead to Debt Sustainability? Yes, but not vice versa. Let me start with a simple example to illustrate the main idea. Suppose you borrow and invest rupees 100. And you borrow it you have to pay an interest cost of, let's say, 8%. And let's suppose that the investment gives you 12%. The return that it yields is 12%. So you can borrow that in year 1, rupees 100. In year 2, 108, which includes 100 rupees principal and 8 rupees interest, you can repay. The return is 112, so you can pocket 4 rupees and keep it with you. But because you have actually generated more, you can do this again. You can borrow another 100 rupees and keep doing this as long as the interest rate that you have to pay is less than the growth rate that you actually can generate or the return that you can generate. And this is captured very well by the American Economic Association's presidential address that was given by the then President Olivier Blanchard in 2019, where he says that if the interest rate paid by the government is less than the growth rate, then the intertemporal budget constraint facing the government no longer binds. The intertemporal budget constraint is just basically some difficult words for what I've illustrated using this simple example, that you can keep doing this over and over again, and as long as the interest rate that is paid is less than the growth rate, This debate has happened in the advanced economies because of the significant decline in their interest rates, but the same idea also applies to India because of the high potential growth rate that we have and the fact that the growth rate is higher than the interest rate. And this idea is captured by what is called the debt equation for debt dynamics. Without getting into the math, let me just give you the basic idea that if the interest rate is greater than the growth rate, then you do not get debt sustainability because debt as a proportion of GDP will increase because you don't get enough to be able to repay the interest cost. But if the interest rate is less than the growth rate, then debt as a percentage of GDP certainly declines. And that is the key idea that is being captured here. The evidence is supportive as well. If you look at the left panel here, what is being shown is the interest rate growth rate differential at time t on the x-axis, and the change in the government debt in the y-axis. And you see that as the differential in absolute magnitude is higher, the change in the government's debt is also higher.